Hey guys, I hope you're having a good day. Oh, everybody waved. I missed GW1. I don't really have a video prepared today. I've got a lot of stuff going on, specifically because I'm moving around the entire area I record, because I'm getting a new microphone, as those of you who watch Visualwood Live will know about, and a lot of things are basically going to be changing. So today I'm quite busy. However, there were a few things I wanted to talk about for a while. In fact, over the past month and a half or so, occasionally something's come to my attention after I've done a video, someone's mentioned something, clarified something, and I've thought to myself, damn, you know, I really would like to mention this. So today I'm just gonna go over that stuff, because I have nothing prepared. So we're in GW1. Why is that, you might be wondering? Well, because of a little bit of stuff from the world of data mining. This was actually very exciting. It came from that shaman who has occasionally, during Season 2 of The Living World, we used to see a lot of these, found new NPC variants and creatures before they ever really got added to the game. And here, as you can plainly see, have been some new varieties of Tengu found. Now, this one's particularly exciting to me because, obviously, the Tengu, first of all, I'm a pretty big fan of them. But second of all, they are actually a different coloration. Now, you might just think, oh, these are just recolored Tengu. There's nothing too interesting about them. But actually, in Guild Wars 1, Tengu were a little bit more nuanced. There were many different tribes of them, factions of them. And here, where we currently are in Guild Wars 1, in this lonely area of the world, we also found some Tengu. We're currently quite far north. As you can see, we're fighting them right now, and there's not going to be too many, so try and get a good look. You notice these Tengu here are green. These are the Quetzal Tengu. They were located only here in the Verdant Cascades, a reasonable-sized map. Obviously, in Guild Wars 1, the maps were much bigger for the size they occupied on the world map, but a reasonable-sized area in this large forest north of Crater. So this is roughly Divinity's Reach around here, right? And then Guild Wars 2, we can barely go further north than like here. This would be Harathi Hinterlands, and it's all the way up over here. The reason we come here in the story is because we're headed to the Tarnished Coast, and there's an Asura Gate here in this cave, the Umbral Grotto. So we only spent a very little period of time here. This is the Verdant Cascades, and in the southern areas of the map, as you can see here, we find notices to trespassers. I wonder if we can actually click it and read it. Wanting people to leave. Now, Tengu are intelligent. They do have stuff to say here. These lands belong to the Quetzal. Trespassers will be killed and their bodies left at the edges of our lands as a reminder to all others of what fate awaits them should they violate our boundaries. So you only found them here, and the fact you only found them here, and the fact there weren't too many quests about them, and the fact that they were an entirely new coloration and skin of existing Tengu, the fact that Quetzal birds in real life are just freaking awesome, by the way, make them my favorite type of Tengu. And what do you know, there appears to be one data mined from Guild Wars 2, and a blue one to boot. So, who knows what ArenaNet are going to be doing with them. I do thoroughly believe that when these guys eventually become playable in Guild Wars 2, we'll be able to choose different colorations of them, just as we can for Char and Sylvari and so forth. And if we can't then choose a Quetzal, I'd really like to see, like, Quetzal be a story choice as well, you know, like one of these 4 groups we can join. We hear that within the Dominion of Winds now, they're separated into, like, 4 houses, one named for the North Winds, the East Winds, the South Winds, and the West Winds. So I'm not quite sure how the Quetzal and so on would fit in, but the idea is many of these tribes, not just the Angchu and the Sensali from Cantha, have gone to the Dominion of Winds, but also all the Tengu from all around, including these guys up here. So that's cool, or maybe not including these guys, I don't know. Considering what I was saying in a previous video as well, just earlier this week, about how we could be going like quite far north as well. You know, this entire section of the map, we'll look at the Guild Wars 1 version of it, shall we? This entire section of the map up here, the Maguma Wastes, it's not too, I mean, for where we are right now in Guild Wars 1, I'll give you that, it's very far away. But, you know, these kind of foresty areas, they extend down here, so maybe we are going to go north of Brisbane Wildlands and stuff, and maybe that's why the Quetzal have in mind. Or they're just going to appear in random places in the jungle, who knows. But yeah, there you go, guys. So that was one thing. A couple of other things from the world of data mining while we're on the topic. I'm not going to spend ages because these things are going to get their own videos when ArenaNet do their weeks dedicated to them. But 2 more elite specializations, the Berserker and the Forge, the supposed elite specializations for the Warrior and the Engineer. Art for them and their tracks has now been mined. As you can see here, this is the Forge. You can see he's wielding his hammer. This seems very sure for us right now. And you can even see some of his drone things. These guys were data mined a while ago. We even saw them in the initial trailer. And what's kind of cool is all of these pieces of artwork usually depict the elite specialization wielding their new weapon, right? Well, if we look at the Berserker, he's not wielding a weapon. He's unhanded. So some people are saying, oh, this is, you know, maybe they'll be unarmed. And I kind of like the irony there. I kind of like the idea because it's like saying warriors were masters of all weapons and now their first elite specialization, they don't need one. But mechanically, I'm not sure how that's going to work at all, because stats are tied to your weapons, sigils, they're what? We just slotting them into our hands? Into our, it's too weird for me. I think they will be getting a weapon. I still think quite a lot they're going to get dagger. However, from what I've seen in comments over the months, it actually strikes me a fair chunk of warriors aren't looking forward to dagger at all, and would rather something else. So that's curious to me. I just think dagger is most fitting though, guys. And I think a berserking, crazy, glassy guy getting dagger, it makes sense to me. But lastly, for data mining, there was a couple of stuff with Masteries. Obviously, we're going to be able to play these in the upcoming beta. So this is why they're now in the live client. In particular, there is ley line gliding now. So there are going to be ley lines warping through the jungle. That alone kind of is interesting to talk about the state of the jungle and story-wise, but we'll be able to fly into those, and they kind of serve as new things that you have to learn to be able to do it. And the other one is stealth gliding, so you'll be able to glide around really silently. This suggests some kind of combat and aggro mechanics actually taking place while you're in the sky, which is cool. And then a couple of more tracks as well that we know nothing about. Chak lore, and which actually I think I'd heard of before, and dinosaur lore. Come on, dinosaurs have got to be a big part of the expansion. And dinosaur lore, I don't know, that could be the... It's going to be so tempting to go gliding. I might just unlock gliding, but instead of maxing it out, then immediately go for, like, one of these other tracks, like dinosaur lore. Come on. Or do you go super early and try to max out your legendary crafting track really fast? I don't know, I remember at launch there were a lot of videos people were doing where they crafted their first legendaries, and there was crazy hype around those videos. Like, these were community members that were just donated tons of stuff, never really earned them in the first place. But I'm kind of like, I've got some savings, I've got some stuff, maybe I should go for a legendary really quickly and just master that master track. I don't know. But yeah, so that was some stuff from data mining. Moving over to GW2 now, there was a fairly big thing that I missed, didn't talk about in a recent news video, and this was the way world selection now works. You'll notice, oh look, suddenly Guild Wars 2 doesn't have a population anymore, the game is dying, but no. Please nobody say this. Alright, ArenaNet re-jiggered the way that their formulas work for deciding which worlds have high populations. Now, obviously, at launch, your server determined the people you saw in PvE, the people you saw in your version of Heart of the Mist, and especially, of course, who you were fighting alongside in World vs. World. Since mega servers, none of that stuff's mattered. So what you could have had was a server with a really high population of players, but none of them really World vs. World. So it costs loads to transfer to that server. You have this World vs. World server that does badly and can't really get guilds and players coming to it because it costs so much for them to transfer. ArenaNet realized that because of mega servers, this only matters for World vs. World now, and so how they decide the population is now based on World vs. World. So, if you don't have many people who actively World vs. World on your server, you're now a medium. Or, I guess they don't dare do low pop servers, because they think that it means that the game's dying or something. So, they're dropping it at medium. But, so now we see a lot more medium servers. We see a lot more high servers. And this is good, because if you want to transfer, it's much cheaper to go to a medium server than it is to go to a very high server. And possible, obviously, to go to the full ones. So, this is much better now. There's actual variety. It's not just every single server stuck on very high. There was a later dev post that seemed to suggest they can't really track who is doing it in World vs. World, but instead what changed was, and this is just how it sounds to me, but what changed, before it was just the amount of accounts full stop that were on a server, and so they were all showing very high. Now it's like active accounts, so like people who aren't playing aren't being tallied, and I think that it still sort of solves the issue. But yeah, this is a nice change. Who knows exactly how it's working, and has been to the benefit of the World vs. World community at the very least. Same over on the EU. Two other very small things as I load into Heart of the Mist on my Elementalist. When I was talking about the Tempest, okay, they showed off the new Tempest heal skill, this thing, okay? Now this looks okay. I said specifically, it's alright, okay? And I was very lukewarm about it. And I'm a bit of a dirty hypocrite, guys, because just 1 week before, we had the Shiro reveal. And what specifically did I say about the Shiro heal skill? That it would have been really cool if it was a copy of Meditation of the Reaper, where you kind of hover and you float like sitting there. And that's exactly what the Water Ellie Tempest does. So, yeah, this completely went over my head. I guess I should give the animation more kudos for that. Perhaps the truth is the animation does just look a bit weird and I don't like it that much, but I would have loved it had it been a callback to Shiro. A couple of people mentioned this to me, and I do think, wow, yeah, that's odd. I was asking for it, and then I got it, and then I said it wasn't very good. Gotta watch that kind of thing. So yeah, that's one thing. The reason we're in Heart of the Mist is another topic I want to talk about. This one's probably the oldest one. When the condition changes came into the game, when specializations came in, there was a lot of talk from the community about how everyone was overpowered and there was crazy damage everywhere. People were melting instantly. ArenaNet had broken the game. And what you guys will notice is no one's really saying this anymore. And ArenaNet didn't really... Yes, they changed some of the incredibly broken stuff. But they didn't change too much of the formula stuff. They didn't really tweak too much. And I think this is a really good example of the community not truly understanding what's going on, complaining about something, and it was kind of right for the devs to know what they know and kind of wait and let it pass. And I kind of wanted to explain the situation a little bit to you guys, because I think it specifically comes down to the PvP amulets. See, most people who only casually PvP'd, most people who never really looked into it too much and did the odd game and then maybe, you know, came back for the first time in ages and came to PvP, they were saying, oh, everybody's dying quick. The main response that even I would have had at the time was, okay, maybe these people saying that it's all crazy overpowered, maybe they're not that great at it. You know, maybe they're not looking out for the really specific important tells. You know, the most iconic thing for me is a killshot warrior. You know, your first game, if a killshot warrior hits you, you get completely owned and you think that the game's stupid and the warrior's overpowered or something, but then you kind of go back and you look and you see that they're charging the rifle up and it's really easy to mitigate. So my first response would have been something like that. But in the while since this patch has come out and since I've been playing PvP on a variety of classes, not just Elementalists and not just Bunky builds, but specifically I noticed this with my Meditations Guardian, I realized probably the biggest reason people were saying this was because of the change to the amulets. And I want to explain this to you guys. The PvP amulets changed as well with this patch. Before the patch, a lot of builds, people were okay-ish, alright, a lot of us ended up going to Celestial, and this did have its restrictions in many respects. But a lot of people did end up saying, okay, Berserker. You know, Power Necro is a great example. A lot of people would just be like, okay, just run the Zerk amulet. The thing is that the Zerk amulet changed with this patch, and rightfully so. The Zerk amulet used to not be just power, main stat, precision, and ferocity as it is in PvE. It used to, unexplainably, also have vitality on it. They actually dropped the stats you gained from ferocity, I believe, and maybe even precision too, and gave you a little bit of vitality in there too. So what you actually used to get were these stats. You got 150 power, 150 ferocity, 560 vitality, and then 560 ferocity too. But when the patch came out, they changed it. They said, why is Berserker Amulet different? It shouldn't be. It was especially weird because the Assassin's Amulet came into PvP after a while, and this never had that vitality bonus on it. So they said, with the patch, right, let's standardize it. And now what you had was a bunch of players coming into PvP, looking at their old build, thinking, right, I'm going to run the Zerk setup. You know, they were excited about all their big new damage on their traits and stuff. They wanted to play into it. They ran Zerk, and they didn't realize that this is the difference between having 11,000 health on an Elementalist, say, and 17,000 health on an Elementalist. And I think really that's what it comes down to. You feel far more squishy on a Zerk amulet than you used to, and it's just because of that vitality loss and that extra bit of power running around. So that's why it felt like everything was broke. It wasn't necessarily broke, it's because you were now running a glassier setup than you used to, and a lot of people were as well. And now I think people are slowly cottoning onto this, people are realizing, and they find out that actually the damage formulas themselves and the rate that condies are ticking aren't like as insanely mind-blowingly broken as everyone was at first stating. So I do think this is pretty important. I wanted to talk about it at some point. It doesn't deserve its own video. And, you know, you could blame ANET on that. You could say, oh, well, they didn't make this transparent enough. I certainly didn't realize it until I looked in, and I tried to look through the patch notes fairly carefully each patch. But yeah, so there you go. Some suspicions, a little observation from me. Moving on. Next in our random mixed bag of things I want to talk about is the Revenant. Now, I really don't know what opportunity I'll get to talk about the Revenant, and specifically because the beta is coming up, allowing us to play it once again. I want to talk a little bit about Underwater. Now, they did say Underwater is, until the Elite Specialization, Underwater really is the last core thing for the Revenant. We have no idea how it's going to work. Underwater combat for the Revenant is really weird, because if you look at stuff like the Ventari stance, that doesn't work underwater because of all the constant ground target, and ground target isn't a thing underwater. And a lot of these stances actually just don't seem to work. So ArenaNet are either going to give us a legend specific to underwater, which would be awesome, by the way, or they are simply going to allow like certain legends to be channeled underwater and tweak their functionality while we're down there. They haven't told us how that's working, and specifically because we haven't seen it on the stream or anything like that yet, I'm guessing on the beta we'll be playing, once again, if you go underwater as a Revenant, you just have nothing and you basically won't be able to complete content under there. The other interesting thing to think about is now that Revenant is a class with weapon swap, we can now expect more than just a spear on the class. So what was kind of interesting before was when you had your light armor character that couldn't weapon swap, they wielded a trident. And when you had your medium armor character who couldn't weapon swap, the engineer, they had a harpoon gun. And so then it made a lot of sense for the Revenant to be a spear wielder. But now they can weapon swap. So what are they going to get? Spear and the spear? Surely not. They're probably also then going to get a trident and a spear gun too. So these are more Revenant skills, even if they are underwater. And yeah, just an interesting thought that they're going to get even more from the underwater stuff than at first I was discussing. Do you guys care that much about underwater abilities? I always did, like, for example, going on my Necromancer and then seeing how Death Shroud changed while we were underwater. And, you know, no one really talks about Reaper Shroud underwater, but that's going to have its own stuff too. Actually, from the specializations contest that I'm running at the moment and looking at the Necro section in particular, you see it's really hard. The way that they've designed Necro traits interacting with their Shroud and stuff, there's actually a lot of do's and don'ts for Necromancer design, specifically because each of those Shroud skills has to interact with certain traits in a certain way. So every single time there has to be, like, the 4 needs to be, like, ticking multiple times to have synergy with stuff like transfusion and so on. It's kind of curious. All right, last thing I really wanted to talk about today, back on lists. This is just a bit of a disappointment for me. This is something I've been a bit sad about with Guild Wars 2 when it comes to build design. And this has a lot to do with the incineration elementalists I talked about a little while ago. So, I don't have the gear on, but we can equip the weapons. Alright, so I showed you guys a build where we were on Dagger Focus, and we were running, originally we had Arcane Power, and we had the Glyph of Elemental Power, and the idea was, with Balthazar runes, the idea was you could create this cool Condi build. Now, the Condi build was this. And it was a fun build to make because I at least thought at first, hey, this is going to be best by taking a lot of traits you don't normally see people run. So Burning Precision, yeah, is kind of standard, but you're really looking for those burning procs now. Power Overwhelming is not a trait you're seeing any Ellies use ever anywhere, but this would be a really cool build because you could get those crazy burn ticks. And this was like what was fun to me about making a new build, experiencing different facets of Ellie and seeing where they could be strong. So you would specialize Earth. No one really does this anymore, but by specializing Earth, look, we get even more Condi damage because we can get a bonus based off of our toughness. And oh look, we get more Condis because of the bleeds. Look, this is called synergy. This is stuff I don't usually care about. And then we can take Arcane, and we can take this trait here, Elemental Surge. This is a Condi trait that we've never cared about before. Makes our Arcane skills inflict conditions. Wow, this is actually good now because of the patch, because look, I can pop Arcane Power and I'll get 5 instant burns out. This all seemed really cool, and this was what I thought was fun about making this build. But as things go, the more I've been playing it, the more I've been thinking, all right, how can I push it? How can I push it? And then optimization starts. And so since that video that I made for you guys, I've come to realize something. I've come to realize that a lot of the unique things about this build that I thought were fun and encouraging us to run them actually still pale in comparison to the totally mediocre, totally normal stuff that Ellies run. So even if we still want to be a burn Ellie, I can tell you guys flatly, Earth, this isn't worth it, especially if you're in Sinister. This tiny little bonus you condition damage, you shouldn't go for it. Instead, you should go for Air. And Air is something that we all typically specialize a lot anyway. We're going to take Ferocious Winds. The reason we're doing this, for PvE at least, is because Air gives us nice amounts of vulnerability. That builds into our Condi fine. The Ferocity boost is really strong. For our Grandmasters, we can get an extra 50% flat damage. So we can still get like a lot of nice flat damage on our Sinister gear too. And then down here, we can take Inscription. This is fairly unique, and you won't see many builds ever really run Inscription, but it's not too great or too fun to pick anyway. But yeah, so you can run Inscription. But already this is a lot more of a normal build. Down here, you'll actually realize something. This Elemental Surge trait, it's not any good. See, what this does is it means when we pop Arcane Power, every 36 seconds, we can push out 5 stacks of burns. So 5 burns over 36 seconds. If instead we take the super standard, super normal, super boring Evasive Arcana that pretty much every Ellie build ever runs, you instead, while you're in Fire Attunement, when you dodge roll, you're getting 2 burns every 10 seconds. So if you scale that up, you immediately see that in 40 seconds, just with this trait alone, you're pretty much matching what the arcane power thing did, except even better, now you don't need this utility slot. You can use something completely different in that utility slot, say for example cleansing fire, another skill we all consistently use. Or as I ultimately found, it meant I could take Glyph of elemental power, and this is another 2 burns every 5 seconds that continually proc. So you get far more burns by basically running the boring normal trait we're all used to, Evasive Arcana, instead of Elemental Surge. And I find this a lot in Guild Wars too. I find that the boring stuff, the stuff we've already ran, ArenaNet try and incentivize us to use other things, but it's short-sighted and we just continue running the same things we always did. Now granted, the gameplay I actually prefer with Evasive Arcana, because you're kind of counting down internally on your head. Every time this cooldown comes up for your flame burst on your dodge roll, you can dodge roll again, keep doing it, and like that's a lot of fun to be able to. The gameplay actually I think is better on this rather than popping a utility skill, but the damage you put out is far more consistent. Here's the more insulting one, and that's the way that fire attunement works. What we want, you look at this, and the cool idea is to take, hey, power overwhelming. Well, no, this is just not any good. The best thing you can take is persisting flames when you're in an environment where other people can give you might, because that makes your flame will last longer. This directly means more conditions, and instead of power overwhelming a tiny little bit of condition damage, it's way better to use Pyromancer's Training, which drops the cooldowns by 33%, so you can drop out tons more burning speeds, which is loads of burns. You can drop down tons more flame walls, which is loads of burns. You can drop down tons more Drake's Breaths, which is loads of burns. This is so much stronger than power overwhelming. I almost feel really stupid for ever suggesting it. And so what's the trait setup we have now? Oh, exactly the same as if we were on a Zerk DPS glass build. We haven't been incentivized to run the other stuff at all. And we're very close to what those builds are too. We've got fire, air, and then arcane instead of water, just for some flat damage. So, I don't know, when I was just looking into this, when I was seeing realistically how it worked, what the better build was, the Incineration Ellie build I did, yeah, sure, has got some merits, but it could be better, and to make it better is basically just making it a lot more similar to stuff we already used, and that just kind of depresses me. Guild Wars 2's got a serious tendency to do that, and I think that's a real shame. Anyway, there you go, guys. Wasn't supposed to be a huge rant about that. A variety of things. As I said, I'm very busy. I'll be moving a lot of things around. You can expect I'll probably sound quite different in future videos, or at least I hope I would. Otherwise, I've wasted a reasonable amount of money buying a new mic, and I'm very, very excited about that. So cheers, guys. Let me know what you think about the various topics today, and I'll catch you next time. Have a great evening, everyone.
As guild members, we spend our time training to master our unique skills, to earn the right to call ourselves guild members. We can fight alone, but our strength is many times greater as comrades in arms when we fight together. There are losses, but there are rich rewards for the taking. Other guilds will confront us. Others will vie for our honors. Some will die by our own hand, and some will live by our mercy. But in the end, in the world of guild wars, it is not reward that calls us, not gain, not revenge. In the end, what calls us is victory.